Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you. And we have very much a treat for you today, and also something that you guys can also get in on helping make a possibility. And I wouldn't say possibility, we want to make this a reality for everyone who's listening and everyone who wants to support. So let me start with, of course, our disclaimer that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only, does not constitute working with a licensed mental professional in your area. I do strongly recommend seeking a mental health professional in your area to work on your unique issues. So today we're going to be talking, as this is also part of LGBT Pride Month, and especially BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, People of Color's aspect of being LGBT at this particular month. We have a very important and very special interview today with a individual who has had an illustrious career and has probably made a lot of us not only think but also laugh over the years. And there is a collective work that is going to be coming out on one of the crowdfunding sites, I believe Zoop, in a connection with StackDeck Press. And this particular piece is one that I know as soon as that becomes clear, I will be putting money down on it. And that is going to be the collective works of Cathartic Comics. And we're here to talk with its creator and its brainchild, Rupert Kinnard. Rupert Kinnard, born in 1954, also credited as Professor I Be Getting Down, is an American cartoonist who created the first ongoing gay/lesbian identified African-American comic strip character, the Brown Bomber, a teenage superhero, and diva Touchy La Flambe, or Flambe, his ageless lesbian partner. Kinnard is gay and African American and lives in Portland, Oregon, with his partner. So, Rupert, welcome to Untying Knots.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and it is an absolute honor to have you on the podcast and to help support this project.
Absolutely.
So, I usually ask the question, the idea about how did you get here, but since most of what we're going to be talking about is your collective works and all, what has this experience been like for you, having your collective works come together?
Well, what I would say is it allows me the opportunity to kind of look at my work in a collective way. Mm-hmm. There's been these different environments in which I've created the strip. And from when I first started drawing the Brown Bomber in my sketchbooks in 1976, I could have never imagined that from the pages of those sketchbooks, so many years forward, I would be experiencing having a collection of actual comic strips published. Mm-hmm. So it's a very humbling experience, and more than anything, I've just been really excited to embrace the journey just by fact of the collection being published has kind of forced me to have a certain perspective about the work, content of the work, and the development of the comic strip. So it's just been insanely exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. And the piece in this collection is called "Oops, I Just
Catharted."
Catharted, which is the 40 collective years of Cathartic Comics, the history of the world's most mildly celebrated underground comic strip.
Right.
And this is being put out by StackDeck Press. So it's a mouthful in and of itself, but again, after reading all of this, I can definitely see that. And I'm going to just put this out there. And if there's any listeners who have got connections to the Smithsonian and the African American Museum, this is an exhibit collection we really need to have. So just put that out there. We really need to have that. Hey, if you got any connections in the Smithsonian in general, we need to have this work up there.
Well, that's exciting to me. Once again, it's considering the substance of the work that is thrilling to me. I had never even considered any degree of importance that the strip has. Never. So really being kind of made to see the significance of it in terms of the African American experience, or even the queer experience, or a combination of those. My whole commitment to advancing feminist ideas and ways of looking at the world, there's so much value, I think, that I never saw as I was drawing the strip and the strip was being published. So much of this has just been a huge eye-opener for me.
And I would say to that, it's a blessing to be able to present your work and have people who see that and recognize it even more. Because one of the things that is in this collective work here is also an introduction done by Marlon R. Riggs. Those who are known of Tongues Untied, who was a major producer who unfortunately lost to the AIDS crisis. But we open, and I'm going to just quote one of the sections from the introduction. Amidst grandish media hype mythology about a new morning in America, the Brown Bomber and the Diva provide a desperately needed voice of sanity and sarcasm, or cynicism, all with delicious indecisive wit and unmistakable black gay sensibilities.
Yes. I was so grateful for Marlon Riggs writing that introduction. It was, in a way, one of the first examples, or my first experiences of having someone of Marlon's intellect kind of dissect what that comic strip meant for him. Once again, when I first started drawing the character in 76, it was within the pages of my sketchbooks, and I really thought that was the only place that character was going to exist. The idea that once I went away to college and I was approached to create a editorial cartoon for the editorial page of the college newspaper, is what lent the political commentary to the strip, because I had decided, well, if I'm going to have a space in the school newspaper every week, it would be great to incorporate this character that I enjoy drawing. And so since he was on the editorial page, I think I got this mandate for myself. It needed to comment on social issues and things that were going on campus. So I did a series of cartoons there for about 3 years. And at the end of that time, I really assumed that was it for the Brown Bomber. And then I moved to Portland, Oregon in late 1979, and was encouraged by one of the queer newspapers here in Portland to run the strip. And the first time it ran, it was simply the Brown Bomber in the strip for a number of issues. And then eventually the newspaper Just Out was created. And Just Out was a real shot in the arm, because it was a paper that was really committed to the diversity of the queer community, which the previous paper had not been. One could say that previous paper was a bar rag that really appealed to gay white men. And So once I moved the strip to just Stout, the new kid on the block, so to speak, they were so committed to diversity that I thought, well, I don't want to just feature the Brown Bomber. I think it would be really great if he had an equal partner. And that's when I created Diva Touche Flambe. And that just really created a nice yin and yang between those two characters. And I could use them to kind of explore the issues that were going on here in Portland, mostly in the queer community.
And to quote you on that section, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But this was one of the sections I found and that stood out to me. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It's a little long. At one point during one of our coming up with killer names for the Drag Divas session, I wanted to come up with a name that actually incorporated the word diva. I also thought it was funny to make sure the magical moniker would consist of a first, middle, and last name. Michael and I thought it would be cool to have Diva as the first name, then have the next two names rhyme. We both cracked up at the thought of the word touche being in a name because of the exclaimability of it. So Diva Touche sounded great. Grand last name and originality was satisfied with the word Bombay. So her initial name was Diva Touche Bombay for all of a day or two. Then I realized that the word flambe also rhymed with touche and also included another accented E at the end of the name. I was hooked. I loved the name, but at this point, I could not say that Diva Touche Flamboy was born. It was the first time I had come up with a name for a character, but now I had to come up with an image to live up to such a colorful name. That image would have a long way to go to catch up with such awesomeness.
Yeah, I look back on those days, and I certainly was quite young. And there's something about my embracing of the whimsical I really appreciated, and the fervor in which I would kind of pursue the development of these characters was just based on my being thrilled with my own creativity. So it's true. Once I came up with the name Diva Touche Flambe, that kind of instructed how would this character look. And also in relation to the Brown Bomber, who already had kind of an established personality as this innocent, naive fairy/superhero. When I created Diva, I was very clear that I wanted Diva to encompass all of the women in my life who were really wise. And there's just something in general I feel that the women in my life possess in terms of wisdom and ways of looking at things. So I thought I would make Diva an extreme extension of that. So her personality ends up being one of nonchalant, kind of perpetuate. Her look of nonchalance is just a part of her persona. Nothing surprises Diva. She's all-knowing and all-wise. So just the whole concept of human behavior, nothing about human behavior surprises her. And the Brown Bomber is in a constant state of, I can't believe human beings act this way. And Diva's kind of like, how else do you expect them to react, or behave? That's what they are as humans. So, just the partnership of those two people have just been such a constant, a constant bit of amusement for me. And being able to develop them within the format of a cartoon strip has just been incredibly rewarding.
Well, especially from the mental health standpoint, it gives a chance to be able to have that reflection, introspection with these two characters on what they were seeing about the world and life around us.
Well, in terms of it is interesting to always look at what I have created through these different lenses. And I rarely have thought of the comic strip through a mental health lens, but it's almost shocking that I haven't, because it was back in the early 80s when Diva appeared on the scene and joined the Brown Bomber, that the name of the strip was changed from the Brown Bomber to Cathartic Comics. And I almost did it as a lark, thinking I want a really cool name for the comic strip. And I thought, Cathartic Comics, that sounds really cool. And it was really years later that I really realized how cathartic the strip had been. I didn't think that in the beginning. I wasn't really aware of it. But as events unfolded in our culture and in society and in the media, I started feeling like I was triggered by so many examples of injustice and of hypocrisy. And I just used it as a way to kind of purge myself of so many of the emotions I was feeling about what was going on in the world. And my attempt was always to try to do it through some form of humor. And I've stated in the past that I never necessarily went for a belly laugh, but my desire was to get a chuckle out of people, followed by them thinking, I've never thought about it in that way before. So that was really important to me at a certain point. But in the beginning, it's almost like not being aware of the mechanics, all of the mechanics that were kind of working through me into the strip. But in the end, it really has ended up being very cathartic, especially in terms of dealing with the world and the homophobia and the racism and the sexism and classism, able-bodyism. There's just so many things that as I encountered them, I thought I want to put a kind of Black, male, queer perspective on so much of what was going on in the news. And at some point was really made aware of how unique that perspective was.
Which I know there's another of the quotes I pulled out. This is from later, probably closer to the 80s period, but this from in one of the sections of the book, it was, even before I left Portland, I had been grappling with a new concept for the Cathartic Comics. As a Black gay male, I was bombarded with people in the media spouting off on insane comments involving their perspective involving people of color. It was maddeningly frustrating, and it was all happening at such a mind-boggling rate, it scrambled my mind. To sit all of these folks down and explain the illogical nature of their words would be too time-consuming. I wanted to come up with a quick way of slapping some sense into them. I remember those fighter pilots during World War II and the hysteria after their planes were hit by enemy fire. We're going to crash. We're going to die, the co-pilot would scream. All of a sudden, the pilot would slap the co-pilot and slap him out of his frenzy. When the co-pilot would calmly say, "Thanks, I needed that," a quick slap to someone's face would serve as a great therapy for clear thinking. Slapology.
Yeah, I think I made mention in the book also. I came up with that concept long before I actually used it. Because I'm really sensitive to the possibility, all of the people who would just say, wow, a concept of slapology would be a promotion of violence. And I took that seriously. I thought, as amusing as I thought the concept was, I'm not going to use it because I just don't want to be labeled someone who is encouraging violence.
Right. And it's one of the, because I know it's one of the So I always say someone consider a classic trope. I know it's a trope that's very much used in like the airplane movies of having the frantic, hysterical, quote unquote, woman, everyone sliding up to slap her to get her to calm down, which again is just not how we address things like this.
Yeah, well, that's definitely one of the concepts, one example of the usage of that as a form of therapy. But ultimately, during the Reagan years, so much was happening with what I considered unclear thinking and people not really examining their own concepts that finally I thought, screw it, I need to do this. A lot of it was really based on the experiences I felt like I shared with other Black people. So many of us would be in situations where a white person would say something or do something, and we go, oh God, here we go again. We need to explain this. And it was such a unified experience among all of us. And finally, it's almost like the floodgates opened, and I thought, I'm going to do this realizing that no matter what concept you come up with that could be considered controversial, there will always be people who get it and people who don't. So sometimes you have to just bite the bullet and basically say, I'm just going to aim this towards the people who get it. And I will endure the people who would say, oh, I don't like this. This really promotes violence and it's not a good thing. And once again, in the end, my being able to incorporate that concept in the strip was very cathartic for me. A lot of times I would see people in the media on the news, and the first thing I could think of is I don't want to sit down and have a debate with them because this issue is so clear to me. And I just felt like I wanted to be able to smack them really quickly. And as I say, the end result, you will want to be, oh, I needed that. I realized I wasn't thinking about that clearly. The idea was that Diva was the only expert in the world of the art, in the art of slapology. So anyone else who thought they could do it would always fail. It was only Diva who could do it in just the right way. And sometimes I amused myself by even having this scientific explanation of the left hand hitting the cheek at the right angle, and it would cause pressure in a certain part of the brain, and everything would just click in place, and you would end up saying, I can't believe how stupid I was to have that perception. So I just had fun with the concept.
Oh, I can definitely see that. And I can also see, again, the cathartic component of that from what we also in therapy call creative expression. Because not everything can be expressed fully with, so we say, talk therapy. That's why we have such things as art therapy and music therapy and dance therapy as a way to express those things that may never have the necessary words.
And scream therapy.
That too. And rage therapy.
I remember learning about that when I was younger. I never participated in it, but I always thought that certainly could be an effective way of just getting your rage or your anger or your sadness out. So,
and grief as well, and in some cases even guilt. So, moving from that aspect, why don't we go ahead and let me just double check my timer here. We got a few more minutes. So I'm going to take us back to that aspect of the beauty of what you talked about, how seeing all of this and what it is produced. Because I'm also going to the forward you did for the We Belong comic, which is also put out by StackDeck Comics as well. And this was in your opening words for that. And it was, given all of these influences, I have a great appreciation and respect for the work presented here. This collection represents yet another major step in the right direction as far as recognizing new voices and perspectives within the spectrum of comics. These stories featured both diverse characters and narratives from LGBTQ people of color. It is also stimulating to encounter flights of fantasy that boast that unique flavor, which exists within the Black community. It is an extra added bonus that a number of the offerings here are from Black women. It is a thrilling collection of dynamic Afrocentric content that revels in its vivid colors, innovative layouts, and original concepts, besides presenting a decidedly different take on science fiction, fantasy, and the exploration of the mystical and the spiritual realms, which are many of the places I think your comics have also taken, just at a earlier in time than what we've done in We Belong. But I think it's key in continuing in all of that.
I think it's been really rewarding in a way to embrace your own voice that's based on your experiences. And I say that to say I'm very aware of what the general media and culture was putting out as I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And I accepted books and theater and television and music in a certain form. And bit by bit, when I started learning, when African Americans specifically started expressing themselves through those forms of media, that we would explore areas that weren't being explored before, bringing our experiences to these art forms, for me, made it richer. And that's why that forward, I love being able to compare the difference between Pat Boone singing Tutti Frutti and Little Richard singing Tutti Frutti. It was quite eye-opening and mind-boggling to me to look back and reconstruct what those events were like for me. I had the opportunity to spend a semester from college from Mount Vernon, Iowa to New York. And there were these 4 disciplines that the semester would involve. It would be visual arts, dance, theater, and music. I knew I loved music. I knew I loved visual arts. I knew I loved theater. I thought I had to suffer through the dance portion because as a kid, I thought, oh, this is just going to be so dull. But the minute I had someone explain to me the state of dance throughout the history of dance, and then the coming of the Alvin Ailey dance troupe and Dance Theater of Harlem, and you start seeing the African American influence on those movements and that music, it was like the beginning of me understanding that there was that flavor that I refer to as flavor in the in my introduction to that book. And when you realize the uniqueness of that culture and that experience to all of these forms of art that almost had a whitewashed quality to it, it's like a moment of celebration. And so I so appreciated being able to make that distinction and really understand how those forms of art were really affecting me when it had some of my own culture in it. It transformed. It's like the first time I saw the film A Raisin in the Sun. And so the subject matter was really of interest to me. The acting, the direction, everything about it rang true to me, where I could see other films and simply be entertained. that was one of the first things as a young person I saw that made me realize the introduction of our language and our mannerisms and our speech could be exciting. And from that point, I feel like I took off, just wanting to see and experience that influence in these various areas of art. And so when I got an opportunity to see that collection of science fiction works by queer Black people, all of those emotions came up again. It's like all of these artists are infusing this work with our culture, and it makes for like this whole new area of excitement of that genre. So I was so proud to be asked to write that forward because I really believed in the project, and it genuinely affected me to see it.
And I very much enjoyed seeing it too. And I also helped support it come into existence as well. So again, to all those who worked on that comic, the graphic novel anthology, chef kiss to you all, and I'm grateful. And I am also grateful for you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think this is a great place for us to take a break. So stay tuned here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Rupert Kinnard, artist, cartoonist, and an observer of our life and history. So stay tuned for the second half, folks. We'll be back shortly.
A little birdie told me Voice America is on X. Follow us at Voice America TRN.
Do you have knots? Not the physical tightness in your neck and back, and not the ones on a rope, but metaphors for the helpful and unhelpful tugs in life that can help us ascend to a new level or stop us from falling too far back down. Join host Perry Clark for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered, a program about mental health and its practice from an Indigenous person of color. We'll help you find the knots that help you and avoid the ones that don't. Listen for new episodes every other week on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
Become a member of VoiceAmerica.com. It's easy, and best of all, it's free. Start out by going to our homepage or any of our channels and click register at the top. Once you've created an account and signed in, you can create your own custom library, opt into our newsletter, search by show, host, guest, or topic of interest, or browse millions of hours of content across all of our Voice America radio channels. Membership gets you more. Visit VoiceAmerica.com today to get started and tailor the listening experience to your taste.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you, and with my continuing our interview here with Rupert Kinnard, cartoonist, artist, what can I say, visionary, who has spoken about so many of the things that we have experienced and created. So we talked a bit about your time in history with the book and such, but I'm also interested in talking a little about your childhood, and we'll talk a bit more about the creation of the Brown Bomber as well. But in looking over some of these, I come back to one of the sections in the early portion, which was talking about your childhood. This is a section as, next I became obsessed with superheroes. The paintings became even more detailed for the likes of Spider-Man, Thor, Hulk, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And since most of the monsters were figures were to be painted with bizarre skin tones, it wasn't until I found myself painting the superhero models that I came across what was called natural flesh colored paint. That was one of the first moments that I experienced concerning the color of my own skin, which seemed far from what was considered the natural color that was needed to use on these superhero models.
Yeah, that does refer to plastic model kits. And I started out, I almost think I started out with battleships, and I would have easily been around 11 and 12. And so I get these plastic model hobby kits, and they'd be in a little box, and they'd be in hundreds of pieces. I always thought it was a thrill to be able to buy cement glue and bring all of these pieces together for the finished product. And then I moved on eventually to dinosaurs, I think. And I would put those together and paint those. And then moved on to movie monster kits, and then to superhero kits. And once again, a box full of hundreds of pieces, and you glue them together, and then you started painting them. And so the first time I painted like Captain America, he's a white man. That was like the first time I'm looking through all of the various jars of paint, and I'm trying to match Captain America's skin color, and it says natural. And it's just so interesting to be of a young age and then make that connection. And I think of it as the first step in finding out, in terms of your skin color, that the difference makes a difference. Because there was such a period of time when I lived in my neighborhood in West Chicago, where I'm just surrounded by other like people. And so it was really easy to just be comfortable with the idea that we all shared skin color to some degree or the other. And then coming across an issue where you're being confronted with a certain skin color and it's labeled natural. It's interesting that would be one of the very first incidences where you would question skin color. And it always makes me want to ask people of color, what was your natural flesh paint color moment? You know, because we live these innocent lives of that not being an issue. And there's always this one incident that becomes the beginning of your being aware that the difference makes a difference.
Yeah, and amongst those many questions of when did you have the talk? For most people think about the talk is about sexuality and such. But for many people of BIPOC, it's the moment of when did we realize our skin color was a factor.
That's right. We
have to have that talk. I mean, now, mind you, in that regards, as LGBT, we actually have to deal with 3 talks.
Exactly.
When is it the skin color? When is it about sexuality? And then when is it about what it means to be LGBT?
Exactly.
Well, some might say it's 2.5, but let's call it 3 conversations there.
Well, for me, later in life, when I had the accident that left me paraplegic, it felt like I had to enter into a whole other world. You know, when I was younger, I had to, I think that the issue of being Black in this culture was my first struggle, you know, to understand, you know, the mechanics behind racism. And to do that as a young person is rather mind-boggling, because you start studying history and you start, you know, talking to older people, and you just, in the beginning, nothing really makes sense to you. You don't understand it. And whether you understand it or not, you start finding out the history of it. And then you realize, I realize that as a male, I'm only attracted to other men, but I'm looking around knowing that that's not considered the norm. And so, of course, years later, I get in an accident and I'm confined to a wheelchair. And that identity, in a way, takes over as being the primary difficulty with those three conditions.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to believe I've gained a lot of insight when I contrast those different ways that I'm perceived in this culture, and to have struggled with whether or not the gay part was more problematic in terms of my dealing with it or being African American. I went through when I was younger, and then, turning 46, I'm involved in an automobile accident and I become paraplegic. And it's like, wow, I never thought anything would trump those other two things.
Those other experiences, yeah.
But in my particular life, my situation, I do believe being in the wheelchair is the thing that makes most people, somewhat uncomfortable.
Right, because of what it has to do with thinking about the issues of ableism. And
absolutely.
Those people who maybe get stuck in pity, as opposed to pity as part of the journey in things and emotional experiences that we need to go through, and thinking about in relation and connection with people. Yeah. But we don't stay in pity. Right. And some people do.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting thing for me to experience the first, weeks and months of, getting around in a wheelchair. I would say that the most intense experiences I encounter, it's funny because it reminds me of Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man. And that was relating to being invisible because of being Black. But being in my wheelchair, the way people don't want to acknowledge me and they look through me, that spans the races. So so much of these experiences are humbling when you have a mind to try to analyze them and figure out, how you're going to deal with it and approach it, and really make a conscious effort to not let it affect the quality of your life. So there's an interesting acceptance that goes on, and more than anything, in terms of being a paraplegic and knowing the degree to which people aren't sensitive to your challenges, I always go back to, well, how was I before my accident? Did I have this heightened sensibility or sensitivity to people in wheelchairs? And I had to realize that I had never really explored it, no more than the people who I encounter. So that was the way it was made easier for me to deal with the reaction of other people with my being in the wheelchair. They're no better than I was before I was in the chair.
Yeah. The way it, and what and how it causes you to build the empathy, if not just the sympathy.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't like the idea that I have the empathy because I'm in the chair. I know I had the empathy before I was in the chair. I think I had respect for people who, were disabled. But I didn't have the sympathy, I did have some sympathy, but I didn't have the sensitivity to understand the ins and outs of ways that, I behaved. So I just can't expect people to be better than I was before I was in the chair. They have to be taught, the the same way I would have had to be taught before I was in the chair.
And I think the point I was probably getting at there, hadn't finished developing the thought, but I think you put the words to it, is about that sensibility.
Right.
And there are so many things in our world, in the structures we live in, that want us to be deadened to those sensibilities.
Absolutely.
And it takes something like this for some people to wake up to realize they have always had those sensibilities. They just haven't been listening to them.
Exactly. But, my comic strip I have one comic that I did after my accident that specifically dealt with those three identities.
Mm.
And it actually the creation of that strip came towards the tail end of my career as a cartoonist. Mm-hmm. Because I've always been interested in graphic design, and I always felt of my comic strip as being a really rewarding hobby. So once I ended up in the wheelchair, I stopped drawing my comic strip and started focusing more on graphic design. Mm-hmm. So it's always interesting for me to even remember what it was like doing the comic strip and having that outlet, and then not having as much of a drive to continue to draw it. Mm-hmm. And putting it to the side, eventually getting rid of my drawing table and all my tools. And it was probably, I don't remember what year it was, that there was the first Queers in Comics conference in New York. And I was invited to that, and that was really exciting. And bit by bit, there seemed to be this resurgence of interest in the strip. Mm-hmm. And I've been sailing over the last 10 years of, all of this renewed interest in the strip. And it's kind of all coming together with the publishing of this this book, the History of the Strip. So it's a very exciting place to be.
Definitely that. And I would say, if you're game for it, there's plenty of new technology that would allow you to come back and begin to draw again if you're interested.
Yeah, I've been playing around a little bit. I'm a little intimidated by, a whole new form, whole new way of drawing. I have an iPad and I have the stylus, and I've been playing around with some things. And I know if I could stick to it, it'll click in. Mm-hmm. I could take to it. But I still need the drive. I still need that, that feeling of excitement. And Lord knows, these days and times, there's such a wealth of subject matter that I always imagine myself, how would I tackle that in a cathartic comic these days? I think I would have the diva would be very tired, the number of people she has to slap these days. I would change the name of the strip from Cathartic Comics to Slapthology, weekly Slapthology sessions, because almost every day there's someone that you just want to jar them into thinking clearer.
Well, just thinking.
Or just thinking. That's a good point.
Just thinking, and actually in some cases, feeling.
Yes. And, the thing that's frustrating to me today are the taglines and the slogans. And I don't think that people are looking behind, these little catchphrases. Mm-hmm. They say these things like they're, the ultimate truth. And I always dissect them. I can never take a slang, way of looking at things like, I can't think of one right now. There's just so many of them are woke.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the term woke. I mean, some people grab hold to it and they think, okay, I know what this means. Oh, you just continue the strip today.
Yes.
I do think that I'm tempted to, every once in a while, I think of when something comes along, how I would handle it in Cathartic Comics.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way it is now, I think I would get halfway through the comic strip and then something else would make its way through the media, and I would be distracted and I have to go to the new thing. I think that's a result of just how common the madness tends to be these days in terms of politics and all the discord that's going on.
And also having technology that allows us to see it so rapidly.
Right.
As opposed to in the past, it took time.
It did.
Time for the report to be done, time for the paper to be printed, time for to warm up, no offense, warm up the radio for everyone to hear it.
Yeah, well, the other interesting thing when I was doing the comic strip, I was involved in alternative media. Mm-hmm. And so there would be all of these areas, all these different publications where there would just be the mention of some story that was outrageous. And I felt like, well, not many people may see this. I want to do my part to, bring it to the forefront of people's awareness and let people be aware of this thing that happened. And so I would incorporate it into the strip. And these days with the internet, those little stories, they blow up and people learn about them quicker and more completely than I think they did when I was doing my strip. Mm-hmm. But still, there's always the minutia, I guess, these smaller things that don't get a lot of play, and they kind of make their way to the forefront in front of a number of people for a short period of time. And then, it could be a very outrageous thing, but not many people will be aware of it. And those are things I used to really want to, be a part of letting more people know.
Mm-hmm. Well, then I would put it to you this way. Even if the new technology exists, it allows you to draw it. Even if, you were concerned about having the deeper direction and connection, if anything, draw it for yourself. A comic strip comes second or third.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that comes back to what I'm saying about creative and expressive health, or artwork and as art as health.
Yes.
So right now, do it for yourself.
Absolutely. It's just, I never would have imagined that drawing my cartoon strip would have gone as far as it has, but I also wouldn't have imagined how much it has played a part in my own mental health. Because to be able to vent my feelings about, things that are going on in the world through that strip, I have no doubt that it has saved a major part of my sanity. Not all of it, but, enough to keep me functioning.
There's any number of quotes I could have thrown out there. The one that's coming to mind is from Lewis Carroll, and that we're all mad here, and some of the best people are mad.
Yeah.
From Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, for me, it really is keeping the madness in check. Mm-hmm. I feel like when I'm veering towards, being really disgusted or frustrated about, so many of the negative things that are going on in the world, I'm so grateful to have easy access to the whimsical and the absurd. Mm-hmm. And those are some of the ways I've tried to include things that have gone on in this culture into the strip, pointing out the absurdities and the hypocrisy of these different viewpoints, and just ultimately, it's just been a cathartic place to work, within my strip.
So please continue in any way you can.
Yeah, well, right now it's getting the book out,
which is a delight there. And with that, I think we should go ahead and wrap up our time together for today. So I know this is going to be on the Kickstarter, and we're going to have that Kickstarter information in the show notes. We don't have it right now at the time we're having this interview because it's all still being worked on over at StackDeck Press by our wonderful publishers and editors, which is Tara and William. But if folks wanted to continue to reach out and support and connect with you, is there any particular way they can do that?
I have what I would consider an antiquated email. My email is roopgroup1@aol.com.
Okay. I'll go and try and make sure I put that in the show notes as well.
So it's all lowercase, RUPEGROUP, and then the number 1@aol.com.
All right, perfect. So we'll have that information out there, and please, folks, sign up for the crowdfunding so we can get this work out there into more hands and be able to have more people see and have that connection with themselves that Rupert has been able to provide us. And like I said before, if anyone's got connections at this African American Smithsonian, this is a good and broad exhibit to have there, not just a single panel and so forth. Let's have a full, proper exhibit of this man's work and legacy in this world. So,
I love it.
Thank you again. Thank you again, Rupert.
Thank you so much.
I am looking forward to this money going out of my wallet. All right, folks. So hope you've had a good Pride, and stay tuned for more, and be well and be safe out there.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.